Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. If you've ever been the butt of someone else's joke, keep watching. This one's for you. Why is he here? She whispered. Seriously, is he stalking us? He said, shifting uncomfortably. I hadn't said a word. I didn't have to. I just stood there with my arm wrapped gently around Delilah's waist, the woman I'd just married, while their faces drained of every ounce of color. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind. Exactly 11 months earlier. The last thing I remember her saying that day, before it all fell apart, was, "Don't wait up. Wes and I have a lot to catch up on." I told her to enjoy dinner. She kissed my cheek. I felt nothing. There were always dinners, always catching up, always Wes. She swore they were just old friends, that he was like a brother, that he'd helped her through some rough years. I bought it, or maybe I wanted to. But then came the voicemail. Not meant for me. Not even meant to be left. She thought the call had ended. It hadn't. "He's clueless," she giggled. "I swear, sometimes I feel like I'm living with a Labrador." Wes laughed. "At least the dog's loyal." Ugh, don't remind me. The way he still tries to kiss me goodnight makes my skin crawl. End of message. I listened to it 5 times. I wish I could say I cried. I didn't. I just sat in my car, keys in the ignition, engine running, listening to my own wife tear me apart with the man I once called my brother. Wesley Clay. Used to sleep on my couch, used to borrow my shirts, used to say I was the only real friend he had left. That same guy was now sleeping with my wife and ridiculing me like I was some pathetic joke of a man. I didn't scream, I didn't break things. I did what everyone in my life expected from me. Nothing. The next morning, she smiled like usual. She made coffee. She asked if I could take the trash out. Like I hadn't heard her whisper to him, "I can't wait to be done with him." I did take the trash out, including her. Not dramatically, not violently, quietly, coldly. I packed a bag, deleted my socials, transferred my savings, and vanished. She didn't even call to ask where I'd gone. That should have hurt more than it did. But you know what healed me? What rebuilt me? Who I met. And now, nearly a year later, they stood across from me. At a wedding neither of them was invited to, crashing it out of curiosity, dressed like they were still the center of the universe. Until they saw her. Until they saw us. That's when everything changed. The first few weeks after I left weren't noble or cinematic. I didn't climb mountains or find myself in some spiritual way. I sat in a tiny motel room off Route 17, eating cold gas station burritos and watching old sitcoms I didn't even like. I kept staring at my phone, not because I hoped she'd call, I knew she wouldn't, but because I couldn't stop watching their lives play out on social media like nothing had happened. Marlene posted a photo 2 days after I disappeared, her and Wes at a rooftop bar, clinking champagne glasses with the caption, "New beginnings." I wasn't even a footnote. I wasn't mentioned. I was deleted. It stung worse than anything. Not the betrayal, not even the mocking, but the fact that I didn't matter. I was the scaffolding they climbed up on and kicked away once they reached the view. My therapist, yes, I got one, told me to find closure, but closure implies something actually ends. This felt like I was the only one left in a story everyone else had already finished reading. One morning, while pretending to care about an auto-generated job board email, I got a message from a woman named Delilah Hawthorne. She was looking for a freelance designer for a wellness startup. Her message was simple, blunt, and oddly warm. We scheduled a video call. She was stunning, not just in the way she looked, but in the way she listened, really listened. I kept waiting for the catch. There wasn't one. She wasn't perfect. She was real. She'd been through betrayal, too. She knew the taste of abandonment. We didn't fall in love instantly. It wasn't a movie. But over time, she became the first person I didn't feel invisible around. What I didn't know was that fate was already lining up its punchline. Because while Delilah and I were building something slow, quiet, and safe, Wes and Marlene were spiraling. He quit his job. She moved into a studio apartment. Their posts grew fewer. Their smiles looked forced. And I was thriving. They had no idea where I was. Until the wedding. I never intended to get married again. Not after the last disaster, but Delilah made the idea of commitment feel less like a cage and more like a shared room with open windows. She had this gentle, confident way of making you feel like you were part of something bigger, not trapped, not indebted, just seen. We didn't talk about revenge. She didn't know the whole story until much later. All she knew was that I had been broken, and she never once asked me to prove that I'd healed. 6 months into our relationship, she suggested a small wedding. Something peaceful. No noise, no drama, she said, while flipping through swatches of pale green linen. I agreed, because all I wanted was her, not a show, not a spectacle. But life has a twisted sense of humor, because no matter how far you run, the past has legs. And sometimes it shows up in heels and a smug smile. The venue was a garden-style resort in the hills, quiet and elegant. We'd invited only close friends, most of them Delilah's. I had no one left. A week before the wedding, an old college friend of mine accidentally mentioned the ceremony to someone in a mutual group chat. Someone who still talked to Wesley. That's how they found out. And they came. I didn't even notice them at first. Not until after the ceremony, when Delilah and I were walking toward the reception tent hand in hand, the photographer snapping away. That's when I saw them, standing near the hedge, dressed up like they belonged there, like they hadn't spent a year sneering at my very existence. Wesley had the same arrogant slouch he always had, but his smile was thin. Marlene looked like she had just swallowed her own tongue. We locked eyes. I said nothing. Delilah didn't recognize them, but she squeezed my hand like she felt the tension bleed through my skin. I didn't flinch. I just leaned over and kissed her temple, and as I did, I watched the two of them stare at her, tall, radiant, poised, like they'd just seen a ghost walk out of a dream they never had access to. Their silence was the loudest apology I never received. It wasn't until the speeches started that they made their move. I saw it out of the corner of my eye. Marlene dragging Wesley toward the bar, whispering furiously as if trying to convince him of something. His expression was unreadable, like a man who'd been pushed too far and didn't know whether to explode or vanish. Maybe I was wrong, but it felt like guilt had finally crept in. Not because of what they did, but because someone else had dared to be happy without them. Delilah had just finished her thank you speech. She was radiant, smiling without effort, glowing from within, like she was untouched by the darkness that once swallowed me whole. I stood beside her, quietly gripping my champagne glass, watching Wes and Marlene inch closer, with fake smiles stretched across their faces. They thought they were subtle. They weren't. People noticed. I noticed. And I was done pretending. Wes was the first to speak. "Ellis," he said, like we were old college buddies bumping into each other at a reunion. "Man, wow. Congratulations. Didn't know you were even dating." His voice was tight. I could see him scanning Delilah, trying to connect the dots, trying to figure out how someone like me could end up with someone like her. Marlene chimed in next, voice dripping with forced sweetness. "She's gorgeous. You really upgraded, huh?" That was it. That was the line that tore the curtain off. I smiled, not because I was calm, but because I was done being their punchline. "That's funny you say that," I said, locking eyes with Marlene. "Because I didn't even know you could downgrade from cheating on your husband with his best friend, but I guess you two made it work." A hush fell over the guests around us. Wes stiffened. Marlene blinked, her mouth opening slightly like she might faint or scream. Or both. I didn't give them the chance. I turned back to Delilah, kissed her hand, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "This is what real love looks like. No lies. No games. Just two people who don't make jokes behind each other's backs." Delilah didn't even ask who they were. She didn't need to. She just smiled that soft, deadly smile of hers and said, "Let's dance." We walked away while they stood frozen. They had come to haunt me, but instead, they saw what peace looks like and realized they were no longer part of the story. I thought that would be the end of it, a cold exchange, a few burning glares, and then silence. But the thing about people like Marlene and Wesley is, they don't like feeling irrelevant. Their entire relationship had been built on the thrill of the forbidden, the thrill of betrayal. And now, standing among linen-covered tables and twinkling fairy lights, they were just two overdressed ghosts haunting a life they no longer had access to. They didn't leave. They lingered. I saw them hovering by the open bar, fake laughing with strangers, trying to blend in like they hadn't just crashed my wedding like a bad plot twist. Every time Delilah and I passed by, their smiles faltered. Wes wouldn't look me in the eye anymore. Marlene kept sipping her drink like it was a sedative, her jaw clenched so tightly I thought her teeth might crack. Then came the guest book. It wasn't even my idea. Delilah's cousin had set it up. A small table with a vintage typewriter where guests could write us notes and drop them in a glass box. I hadn't given it much thought until I saw Marlene standing over it. Her fingers hovered above the keys. I didn't move closer, but I saw her press 3 keys. Then stop. She looked around, eyes glassy, then tore the paper in half and stuffed it in her clutch. I shouldn't have cared, but I did. Later, Delilah pulled me aside. "Do you know them?" she asked calmly. I nodded. "I used to." She didn't press. She just looked at me, really looked, and whispered, "You don't owe them a second more of your night." She was right, but fate had one more jab waiting. As we were about to cut the cake, one of our videographers approached me with a strange look. He asked if I wanted a sneak peek at a few clips. I said sure, not thinking much of it. He handed me a phone. There on the screen, caught accidentally while testing his camera angle earlier in the evening, was a shaky shot of Marlene and Wes, arguing. "You said this would be quick," she hissed. "I didn't know she was that pretty," Wes snapped. "He never had that before." She scoffed. "He doesn't deserve it." Wes shrugged. "Neither do we." I didn't show it to anyone. I just deleted it and smiled. They had shown up to ruin something, but instead, they unraveled themselves. The day after the wedding felt like a dream with edges. Everything was soft, perfect, until it wasn't. I woke up to sunlight, the scent of lavender from Delilah's hair still lingering on the pillow next to me, and for once, my chest didn't feel like it was caving in. But by noon, the cracks began to show. Delilah had gone to brunch with her sister. I stayed behind to finish packing up the final bits from the venue. That's when I got the message. No name, just a local number, 1 sentence. "You should know what they said after you left." I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to block it. I didn't want more drama, but curiosity is a dangerous thing when you've been burned before. I replied, "Who is this?" No answer, just another message, this time with an audio file. My hand hovered over the play button. I almost closed it out, but I didn't. I listened. Marlene's voice, unmistakable, slightly slurred. "He thinks he's better than us now. Look at him with his perfect wife and fake new life." Then Wes, sounding tired, defeated almost. "He is better than us." "He actually walked away," Marlene snapped. "Oh, please. He just ran off and found a pretty shield. She doesn't even know the real him." Then silence. I expected rage to hit me, or sadness. But instead, I just laughed, not loudly. It was one of those dry, breathless laughs where you suddenly realize how small someone else's world really is. They hadn't moved on. They hadn't grown. They were still trying to drag me back into their pit because they couldn't stand to see me above it. But that one line, "She doesn't know the real him," it stuck with me, like a splinter. Did she? Did Delilah know everything? The truth is, I never told her about the night I almost confronted them with a kitchen knife in my hand. I never told her about the panic attacks that came every time I opened my email, afraid I'd see Marlene's name. I'd shown her the calm version of me, the cleaned-up man, the composed partner, not the man who once screamed into his steering wheel until his voice cracked. Maybe I was a lie too, just a more elegant one. And suddenly, I wasn't angry at Marlene. I was angry at myself. Because what if she was right? I sat with the audio file for hours, not playing it again. Once was enough. But just staring at the screen, rereading that one sentence. She doesn't even know the real him. The worst part wasn't that Marlene said it. It was that she wasn't entirely wrong. Delilah had fallen for the healed version of me, the one who smiled in photos and didn't flinch at the word trust. She never met the version of me who used to cry in parked cars, who once deleted a birthday reminder because it belonged to someone who betrayed him. That version was buried. Or so I told myself. By the time Delilah got back from brunch, I had already rehearsed 3 different speeches. Each one sounded worse than the last. She walked in, radiant and glowing from laughter, holding leftover croissants in a brown paper bag like it was some small gift from the world. "Something's off," she said immediately, reading me like a map. I hate how good she is at that. I tried to brush it off. She didn't let me, so I told her everything. From the night I found out. From the voicemail, from the way I left without saying a word, to the way I started building a new life out of fear more than courage. I even told her about the knife, about how I stood in the kitchen gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white, just staring at the front door, waiting to hear them walk through it so I could do something reckless, something stupid, something that would have destroyed me forever. I didn't spare the ugly parts. I didn't protect her from the cracked pieces of who I used to be. When I finished, she didn't say a word. She just sat there, eyes soft, expression unreadable. I waited for her to step back, to look at me differently, to realize that the man she'd married was still fractured in places she couldn't see. But instead, she reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "Now, I finally know why I love you." I didn't understand. "Because you survived yourself," she said. "That's harder than surviving anyone else." And I realized maybe that was the difference. Marlene had always needed me to be smaller than her. But Delilah, she didn't need me to be perfect. She just needed me to be real. I used to think closure was something people gave you. Like it came in the form of an apology, or a tearful confession, or some grand moment where everything suddenly made sense. But real closure, it's a quiet decision. It's choosing peace when your ego still wants revenge. It's learning to stop bleeding from a wound that no longer deserves your attention. 2 weeks after the wedding, I received an email. No subject line, just a message. "I hope you're happy now. You didn't have to humiliate us. Marlene." I stared at it for maybe 10 seconds. No anger, no regret. Just this strange, weightless feeling, like finally setting down a box you'd been carrying for far too long. I didn't reply. I wasn't the same man who used to beg for understanding. I wasn't a man who needed them to see my worth. They had their chance to know me. They traded it for a thrill, and that's all it ever was. Fleeting, unstable, forgettable. But me? I kept building. Delilah and I moved into a small home just outside of town, surrounded by wild trees and silence. No ghosts, no shadows, just space to grow. She paints in the mornings, barefoot with music playing, and I still catch myself staring like I don't fully believe she's real. Not because she's perfect, but because she stayed when I showed her the worst. And me? I finally stopped rewriting the past in my head. I let it stay where it belongs, behind me. I don't know what happened to Marlene and Wes after that. I don't care. That's not bitterness, that's peace. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. I got my life back. But more importantly, I got myself back. So, if you're still in the middle of your own heartbreak, if you're sitting in silence wondering if it ever gets better, it does. Maybe not the way you imagined. Maybe not with the people you thought would stay. But it does. You're watching Reddit Confessions. Drop a comment below and tell us, what's one historical event or personal experience that completely changed the course of your life? We'd love to hear your story. And if you haven't yet, subscribe for more emotional, powerful journeys like this one. Until next time.